Next up, we have the privilege. We have Chair Cannon's asked to be excused, and so we have the Vice Chair, Board Member Gravitt, going to give the committee report. And I apologize, I didn't screen all of this if what was in consent, so hopefully you're on top of it.
Do you want to do the consent? Just
No, we
skip
already
the consent?
did the consent. No,
But the one that was
we're gonna
pulled
do the
from
ones
consent?
that-
Okay, just do it in order.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first item is the alternate school accountability. I don't know how much background you want on this, but a work group was put together to come up with a definition of.
We're kind of after the action
Okay,
piece.
all right, then
and
I'll just go
we'll
there, and if
back,
people have more
because I-
questions.
Okay.
Okay, so the committee action was to approve the definition and statement for alternate school accountability. The motion carried unanimously. Okay, and then the motion for the board, I thought Chair did it, but the Standards and Assessment Committee moves that the board approve the provided definition and statement for alternate school accountability.
Okay.
That's a little different than how it's stated in the,
Is it?
yeah.
Okay.
See, what I have in here is that, that the board approve.
Okay, I'll look on
blended
board
def-
docs. Okay, I just printed off last night, but,
That
okay.
the board approve the blended definition and statement for alternate school accountability.
That may be what you sort of said.
Yeah, it is. The Standards and Assessment Committee moves that the board approve the blended definition and statement for alternate school accountability.
All right. So the motion before the board is that the board approve the blended definition and statement for alternate school accountability. Any discussion to the motion? Board Member Belknap.
Yes, and Jenny, maybe you can give me a little clarity here. At the
Okay.
very first, it gives, okay, if the end size is too small, I get
Yes.
that piece. And then I also, if they're in the bottom 5 percentile because for a purpose, and I guess I'll use like Spectrum Academy, would that be considered one there that would now get the alternative?
Yeah, so the work group defines special purpose schools as either alternative, or schools that have students with disabilities or youth in custody.
Okay,
So-
so who determines if they're an alternative school? Where is that designation? What's designated as an alternative school?
So alternative, I don't know if Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman. Leah Voorhees.
Sorry, I should
We'll
have
have
asked
to turn
ahead
that
of
mic.
time.
Assistant Superintendent Leah Voorhees. So the definition is included in the handouts. It's a little bit long, so I can't quote it for you.
Yeah.
But the school, either if it's a charter school or a school within the LEA, whose purpose is
I
dropout
can
prevention
read that.
and
I can read
intervention.
that.
So if it's a charter school, that would be included in their mission or in their charter.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm still weighing this out. So when we're talking about an alternative school, are we also, is this, they'll get a different accountability system? We're not just talking about special education schools. Okay, so if, for example, a school says, oh, we have this whole section about dropout and about school what's the other term?
Prevention and intervention.
And prevention, they can now be an alternative school? Is there a percentage or numbers of students inside of a school that is their main mission? Or, because we do have district schools that they have noted as alternative schools. But that doesn't mean every child in that school is behind in their credits. That doesn't mean they're behind. They may not be doing interventions for because they're, I don't know that encompasses everything that we need for what an alternative school is. I think it opens the door for a lot of questions. So what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them.
Can I respond?
Please respond.
So the committee actually wanted to narrow the focus. We considered the schools that are currently considered alternative in the accountability system, which is about 27 schools. And the focus of alternative schools that are currently considered alternative is specifically dropout prevention and intervention.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
And then we added the YIC and the special education schools.
Okay.
So there are
I'm
there are
struggling.
schools who have tried to become to get that designation as alternate, but they have not met that criteria because that's not their purpose. The purpose of the school is not dropout prevention and intervention.
But nowhere does it say that that's their only purpose. It says it's their key purpose. And I think a school could say our key purpose is to prevent dropout. I'm a little concerned about the definition. I should have brought this up earlier because I read it earlier. Brittany, I know you guys. Sorry, Chair.
Okay.
I'm
Vice Chair
raising my
Brittany.
hand.
Okay, seeing how you're on and we're listening to a fine track meet there, Board Member Ellis, did you want to
you're
weigh
letting me
in?
go. Well, I just wanted to reiterate, I am concerned about the N size number. Statistically, the N size of a 10 is good for protecting student privacy. I'm still concerned about the N size being used as an accurate measure. And so I would like more research to be done and to reopen discussions surrounding what is a valid N size.
Okay. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
Just a couple questions. So, under this definition, it sounds like only high schools could be designated as alternative. Is that correct, if they're focusing on dropout and credit deficient? Is that the assumption, I guess I should
Yeah,
say?
the assumption is they're secondary schools, yes.
And can I ask a follow-up question, Chair?
Yeah, follow up.
Okay. And then my second question is, because under our new ESSA plan, all schools have to use the same accountability, this only applies for schools that drop into that 5%. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. We wouldn't even need to do a second tier review if a school didn't end up in that bottom 5%.
Okay. Board Member Lear?
My concern is, I'm kind of coming back to what Laura started with, and that was, who is it that's going to make the determination? Because the criteria is a little vague, and only, I mean, it's a little vague, but who, so is it a staff member? Is it the superintendent? Is it the board ultimately? Who would say, yes, you meet the criteria?
Respond. So the data and statistics section could make that determination based on if the LEA determined that a school was an alternate school and
So
met this
presented-
criteria.
Presented itself that way.
Yes, and then for charter schools, we could make that determination very simply by pulling up their charter.
And so, but that still doesn't give me an answer. So we said the data and statistics section, but then you're special ed, so what would it?
So for the alternate school, for special ed, it's very simple because those schools are already determined as special school, and for YIC, those special schools specifically for students that are in care have already been designated.
They're called YIC schools.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that helps me, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Again, the motion before the board is that the board approve the blended definition and statement for alternate school accountability. Okay, let's vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'm kind of nothing, I don't know what.
Gosh, Laura,
Okay.
you're all over the place.
Well, let's see if we have 8, then we move forward. If we don't, then it goes back and it gets a few things clarified. So all in favor say, will all those ayes, raise your hand. Okay, Board Member Warner, Gravitt, Lear, Hanson, Nielsen, Stokes, Reby, and Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. So that we have enough votes to pass.
Lisa vote on that.
We can talk more about it.
Elisa, did you vote on that?
It's too broad.
Sorry, I was trying to not have you here to track me.
Well,
I'm going to have to say no because I still have some concerns.
okay. All right, but it passed. We had 8 to move it forward. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
Next item is the school report card. The committee action, we move forward to go forward with using criterion reference test items, the meter icon for ratings at the indicator level, and to allow LEAs to highlight school commendations with the report card. The motion for the board was the Standards and Assessment Committee moves that the board approve the school report card with the following recommendations. Use criterion reference test items, use the meter icon for ratings at the indicator level, and allow LEAs to highlight school commendations.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve the school report card with the following recommendations. Use criterion for references test items, use the meter icon for ratings at the indicator level, and allow LEAs to highlight school commendations. Let's see, discussion, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Could you specify what is meant by criterion reference test items on that report card?
So we chose criterion referenced over norm reference so that we're measuring, they're compared to each of the standards, is that correct? Rather than, how you compare with other people, for example.
Do you have a follow-up?
Sorry. So this is on the school report card, correct? And so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I still don't understand what you mean, like what test items?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, anyone, but it's so, okay, Terrell says I'm wrong. We're measuring to see how students performed on the criteria. So the standard, did they meet that standard? Were they able to answer that question and meet that criteria?
So,
Okay. Please.
Sorry.
so
As opposed to how they compared to, maybe another state, another grade school, et cetera.
Do we have staff that want to?
Percentage, percentile.
So it's not each student and their test questions, but it's a percentile of proficiency based on criteria. Sorry.
Okay, we have.
We'll have the boss explain.
Okay, push that. There we go.
And Michelle Neal, Accountability Specialist. So what we're talking about here is indicator ratings ratings at the indicator level. So within the accountability system, we have achievement, growth of English learner progress, post-secondary readiness, and growth of the lowest 25%. In the absence of letter grades, we want to look at putting some sort of rating on each indicator so that they can be compared to one another, such as to provide context. So, such as this school is average in achievement but high in growth, or high in EL progress and average in achievement. It's just a way to provide additional context to the school report card at the indicator level in the absence of letter grades.
Again, a follow-up.
Sorry, just my density is showing. So I understand all the different items that are on the report card. And so you're saying that these would be indicator level pieces, and it would be individual to the school, not referenced or compared to other schools. So when we say it's not test items, so we're not talking about the RISE and specific test items that are in the RISE, but we're talking about each indicator, and we're giving the actual points that school received on that indicator. Am I understanding that?
Yes, it's not based on the test items at all, but rather in the points received for the indicator. Okay. We wouldn't display the points, but would display some kind of a rating based on criteria to show the relative performance within the indicator for the school. It's a little hard without the images.
I think she had the image of, I think you're talking about the meter, instead of giving a grade, you kind of see this meter, and we just talked about how that's a little less demoralizing and. Yeah, right. But norm, like, I mean, and maybe this isn't clear, but like in a classroom, if it's criterion, if a student gets the answer right, they get it right. Norm, they didn't do as well as this other person, so, but this is, if it's right, it's right.
Right.
Right?
So thank you.
Yeah.
So basing it on norm would mean that we would compare
Yes.
each indicator to how the performance of all schools in the state in that indicator. The recommendation from the committee is to use criteria rather than a normative approach, which means we would set standard cut scores within each indicator. And so all schools would be compared to those cut scores rather than to other schools.
How they performed.
This is the slide that shows several options. The committee, I believe, preferred the meter to stars or letter grades at the indicator level.
Okay, Brittany, you look a little bit confused. Let me grab a couple, and then we're going to come back to you as I don't want you to be confused.
Oh,
But,
that's cute.
But give that a little thought here. Board Member Lear?
I missed this part of this discussion because I was in the Law and Licensing Committee, so I apologize. I should have expected to get all my concerns out. And then I've had some emails this week that raise another concern. So I need some clarification. This is for clarity's sake. It'll only be this year. It's this year where there's a hiatus to grading. Is that right? In the 18-19 school year, is that right?
Possibly, yes.
Oh, and the following year, and the 1920 school year?
Who's coming to clarify that?
I just want to make sure I'm.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
Okay, Darren?
Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning. The board right now has exercised your authority to withhold issuing overall school ratings or grades for the 2018 school year this fall.
This last school year?
Yeah, so this fall's publication of the school report cards, which are scheduled to be released on December 10th.
Okay.
If the board were to exercise some kind of an authority to do that in the future, that would be up to the board. Right now, it's just for this fall.
And so the board has the authority
The legislature authorized the board to make that decision. I don't remember the statute, but for this year specifically. And then also in any year in which there's significant changes with assessments that make it difficult to calculate growth.
Okay.
So that's why I have an undefined answer next year, because we are implementing a couple of significant assessment changes this year as well.
And so can I have a follow-up? Chair, I guess I can. So I am going to vote for this because this is clearly a better approach, but I'm going to hope that the board could vote or discuss again the advisability of getting rid of this school grading altogether, because I continue to get emails about this, and I think we keep moving this so much around the edges that it barely resembles school grading, and I think we ought to just be upfront and say we don't believe in school grading. So I'm just saying that. I'm going to vote for this. Thank you for the clarification and the reminder.
Can I add an additional comment to that response? And that is, the programmers who are developing this for us, they have built into the framework the ability to issue a school grade. That's turned off for this year with the intention that that functionality is available moving forward should need or desire to be there. If it's not, we're hopeful that these indicator level reports will give our constituents enough information that they might not feel it is a need for the overall school ratings in the future.
There would have to be a statute. There'd have to be a statutory change. Thank you.
Okay. Boy, we're just moving right along. It's going to be a long night, board
Yeah.
members. There's some other items on the agenda, and it's
These are the two big ones.
unfortunate.
We'll-
Hopefully we retain 8 board members to get through them. Okay, Vice.
It's not me.
Let's see, Board Member Lisa Cummins.
So I'm interested in this a little bit. How is it to be, will schools that are excelling in one area, will that be highlighted first and foremost so that, and all the bad stuff can be in the back, or is all the bad stuff going to be given first? It's kind of like a give me the good news first, give me the bad news first scenario. How is it going to be presented? What's the layout?
Thank you. I wouldn't say that there's a hierarchy of how it's displayed. All indicators are displayed on the same page, and then users are able to consume and interpret that as they see fit. Nothing's prioritized over one or the other. This indicator level rating is only intended to provide context and comparison between indicators when the numbers themselves are difficult to interpret.
Okay, so if I may follow up just real quick.
Yes.
Will there be other highlighting factors about that specific school on the report card, though, that are individual?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
So schools have I've been working on this today actually. Schools are permitted the ability to self-report up to 2 school quality indicators, chosen from the list that was defined in board rule. About domains of implementation. So schools have the ability to upload 2 indicators of their choice that highlight or show progress or successes of their choosing, and that that flexibility, I think, and that opportunity, I think, gives schools a lot of freedom to show for themselves the work that they're proud of.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments or discussions. We'll repeat the motion from the committee, and that is that the board approve the school report card with the following recommendations. Use criterion reference test items, use the meter icon for ratings at the indicator level, and allow LEAs to highlight school commendations. Not seeing any further discussion, so let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. It was a weak aye, but we're going to have to get our pirate yell on or something like that. Vice Chair Gravitt, please.
Okay, here we go, double
continue.
speed. The next item, college readiness assessment writing. The board took no action because we requested more information, so I will move to the next item. Digital teaching and learning, that was an information item. The new plan approved for digital teaching, that was, there's a committee action there. New plan approval for digital teaching and learning qualified grant, R277-922. Committee action, the committee has requested that Sarah review the rule for this program. The committee would like to request modifications to simplify the process and change the timeline from 3 to 5 years. But there is no motion for the board.
No. I think the next one is motion for the board. The R277496.
Yes.
Okay.
R277-496 K through 3 reading software licenses amendment. Committee action, motion was made to approve R277-496 draft 1 on first reading and forward the rule to the board for approval on second and final reading. The Standards and Assessment Committee moves that the board approve R277-496 draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-496 draft 1 on second and final reading. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous.
R277-495 required policies for electronic devices in public schools repealed. Committee action, a motion was made to repeal R277-499 on first reading and forward the rule to the board for repeal on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board repeal R277-495 on second and final reading. Discussion to the motion. Board Member Lear.
Yes, I did pull this from the consent calendar, and it was in my committee, and I actually made this motion, and then I woke up. But I think that it is, in rethinking this, I think it's really important that the board set some standards, and it goes to our discussion previously, that the board does stay in the driver's seat, set some standards for LEAs using various electronic devices. As we were initially encouraged, or at least it was recommended by staff that the rule be repealed, the staff members said, but most of it's in the technology master plan. And as I thought about this, and again experienced last week, the technology master plan, and I may be using an inexact term for that, is not a rule. And I think if we want to hold the LEAs to certain standards, or tell them this should be their standards for technology use among their students and probably adults, that we need to have a rule in place. And so I'm not in favor of repealing this, but probably what we have is outdated and needs to be revised. So wanted to at least not have us repeal this, and have the staff make some recommendations about changes.
I'm not seeing any other further discussion. I'll repeat the motion before the board, and that is that the board repeal R277-495 on second and final reading. Again, seeing no discussion, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, will the ayes raise your hand and be noted? Board Member Warner, Board Member Hanson, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Reby, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. Am I missing anyone?
6, that's just 6. Is Joe voting on?
Joe, are you voting on this? Let me.
It's a split vote, so you may want to.
It's to repeal.
To take away all the state standards for,
Well,
For electronic
the motion
devices.
before the board is that the board repeal R277-495 on second and final reading, which is the required policies for electronic devices in public schools. Okay, let me, wait, now that we got our board members all back in their seats, let's try this one more time, okay? R277-495, okay, required policies for electronic devices in public schools, okay? The standards assessment moves that the board repeal R277-495 on second and final reading. All in favor, this is at the repeal, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
no.
Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand again. Well, it's, yeah, so, okay, here we go. Board Member
There
Hanson?
aren't. There aren't. No.
Nielsen, hey, we're done with this discussion.
No, there is not.
We're having the vote.
Yeah, but there's not.
Okay, this is important to get this right, so I'm gonna pull this all back. We're gonna go back to discussion. This is important, so you guys can put your hands down, I'm not gonna count. Okay, we're talking about the motion before the board is to repeal this rule.
Oh, we're done voting?
No, we're done, we've got some confusion, we're trying, it's real important that all board members are important. When you have some staff, please come up. There's a reason that this was in, and there would be some context to why the discussion happened. Okay? Because now we've got a lot of board members here. Oh, I was wrong. Okay. I was not in the committee, but the committee had this discussion, and it was recommended that the rule be repealed. Why? And that's what I'd like, I think that's what people are wanting to try to figure out. So can staff speak to that?
Sure.
Okay, let me turn this, I've got both these turned on. Okay, thanks. Oop, did we lose you? You're back on.
Okay.
Thank you. Sarah Young, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning. So we actually convened a group of staff from across departments, including with Dr. Whitney Phillips and student data privacy, as well as with CTE, as well as with our own IT department, and then digital teaching and learning in teaching and learning, to be able to talk about this rule. It is quite an older rule, and so it was something where it wasn't clear here within the agency who truly had ownership over some of those components, and that as things had progressed in regards to getting new legislation and new expectations, not just around digital teaching and learning, but also really student data privacy, that we felt that in looking at the rule, our approach was to look at the rule and compare it to existing requirements that we have within our programs to see if there was duplication. When we did that crosswalk, which we presented as part of that committee meeting, we found that the majority of the rule was in duplication. With that said, if there are certain elements that need to remain in regards to a rule, as staff, we would completely support that, and are happy to go back and take a look and work with the different board members to address that.
And I just wanted to add, this rule is up for continuation. It needs to be continued by December. So there is time to send it back to committee if you wanted to do that, or you could just repeal the existing rule and we could start with a new one. The effect in the end is the same, but we're happy to do whatever you recommend.
Okay. We're going to go into some discussion.
And I'd like to say he has a fine-looking mustache going.
I was taught well.
Okay, there you go. Board Member Reeby.
So this was the confusion that I had. The rule is being duplicated someplace else, so this was extraneous. Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Lear.
And I've had a number of things come together this week that's made me concerned about this rule. I had a school ask me to review its acceptable use policy and digital learning policy that the school had. So I said, I think there's some state standards on that. So I went to 495, remembered that I voted to repeal it, and then I looked in all the typical places. I looked in the privacy law. I didn't look in the digital teaching and learning master plan, but I did look everywhere in the law else that I could think of. And my feeling is the digital teaching and learning master plan is not a rule. It is something that LEAs would have to follow to get some money, but not all of them want that money or get that money. So in light of the events of this week, it seemed really important to me that there be a rule where, if it's so important to us as state board members, we set minimum standards for LEAs that are in rule. So they're governance. It's a governance document that said LEAs must have these minimum standards in place all across the state, charter schools, school districts, in one succinct place that then they can see what those minimum standards are and aren't expected to go to various parts of the law where they might be present and or go to the teaching and learning master plan, which is not a rule. So that was my point in feeling like there wasn't a good, strong, succinct rule in place. Absolutely agree this needs to be revised. I guess my druthers would be to have something in place until that revision comes about rather than repealing this and, to be 2 months or 4 months, or if it's a licensing rule, 1.5 years before we have a rule in place. So that was my thinking. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that information and that we have more board members at the table now. So I'm going to repeat the motion and we're going to vote on this. And the motion is that the board repeal R277-495 on second and final reading. Let's vote on the motion. This is to repeal. All in favor say aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay.
Okay,
It fails.
R277620, Suicide Prevention Programs Amendment and Continuation. A motion was made to approve R277-620, Draft 3 on first reading and forward it to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion to the board is that the board approve R277-620, Draft 3 on second and final reading. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Oop,
Aye.
hang on,
Oh.
hang on. We're got a late comer comment on the discussion. Board Member Lisa Cummins.
So the green text is brand new. Let's see, youth suicide prevention grants, LEA reporting requirements. Governing policy, just, could someone explain this? Why are we, shall include the components? Is there someone who could explain this, or what are we basing this off of? What studies are we basing this off of?
I'm trying to figure this. Okay, again, let me make sure I turn these back on. So I didn't get your question. Okay, we have, I'm sorry, I didn't follow your question really clearly. Your question
What
was?
studies are we basing our conclusions off of when we look at the studies in the grants, providing grants? Give me a summary, please.
Sure. Jeff Van Holten, Policy Advisor. I will make an attempt to answer the question, and I have Kathy Davis here who will probably correct me when I do this incorrectly. So, but what we added into this rule is the ability to bring in the ACEs and other empirical data. And ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. It is a very wide-known study around the impacts that these adverse childhood experiences can have on the outcome of a child. But
Okay. So I'm looking at the ACEs list right now, 1 through 10. Why is economic status not part of that?
I'll
It's
defer
not
to Kathy
traumatic?
Davis on that.
It's not traumatic. Yeah, well, I'm looking at the adverse childhood experience: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical, emotional, drug abuse, mentally ill, divorce, incarceration. Having experienced a form of homelessness myself, why would that not be included?
The 11th.
That's, I mean, that's pretty dramatic for a child, right?
Kathy Davis, Suicide Prevention Specialist. These are 10 adverse childhood experiences that were on the survey that was done by Kaiser Permanente, and that wasn't necessarily one of the adverse child experiences, although we understand that poverty and homelessness absolutely is a traumatic experience for a child. And so part of this rule is going to be informing educators about the influence of trauma and that intersection with trauma and suicide.
Okay, so we also, if I may, Chair, follow up. If we also have children coming from refugee status, coming from, we had one story of a student seeing another family killed in front of their eyes, right? Why is that? I mean, there's several other things missing here, and I think we're limiting here, but what other studies are being included in this?
I do want to point to line 54 in the rule that it will include other empirical data, not just the ACEs study. So other data can be brought in to inform the trauma-informed practices, if that's helpful.
Can I answer her questions?
Board Member Warner?
Okay. I'm going to bring a book in for you tomorrow. It's called The Deepest Well, and it's based on the adverse childhood experiences, because this is based on research that was done about 25, 30 years ago. And so the adverse childhood experiences, if you read through the questions, not what you're looking at, but the questions themselves, the 10 questions, there are a number of things that ask, did you have enough to eat? For example, leading to is there financial issues there, a financial issue?
Right.
So those things are kind of covered, but this is based on something that was done about 25, 30 years ago, but it does include finances in certain ways.
I guess I'm
You'll want to
I'm
read the
taking it
book.
wrong.
Read the book.
Okay,
Also,
hang-
disassociation is another, that can cause trauma. But I just have questions about the myths and how we're pulling in the data, what we're using the data for, and if it's really scientific based, and if we're really looking outside of government scopes of.
Dr. Harris does a great job explaining all of the research that has been done over the past 30 years and compiling it. Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, who
I don't know who that is, but but I'm sure that there's other psychologists and clinical psychiatrists that will say.
Can I
other
dive
things.
into this conversation?
I'm sorry,
This
it's
isn't
not
coming through the chair
inappropriate,
back
but-
to people and et cetera, but it's a good discussion that can happen, that might have happened earlier than our board meeting, and it can certainly happen after. But I believe in reading on this rule, there's a place that says "and other things," and so there's, as data or opportunities for information to come to USBE, it certainly can be considered. And also, if board members know of something that's out there, they can certainly bring it to somebody's attention to be considered. That's how I read it in the rule. So I think to answer the first question, that part of "and other" covers more than just that one part. And
Okay,
so-
if I could just
So I'm trying
conclude
to
to my
get your
point.
concern.
Let me get to my point.
Yeah, or your point.
In the Let's Be Brave today, and I think I pointed this out at another meeting, but if none of this would have helped me, and I know that none of this would have helped other students in various situations. How to be brave, how to relax, how to ask, validate, engage. None of that would have helped me. So I don't know. I think we're putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem, and I don't think it's our jurisdiction to be doing that.
Okay, Board Member Bolter.
I was just reading through the committee discussion, and I'm just wondering if Member Ellis's concern was addressed, and if anything was added to the rule to place to where parents need to be notified ahead of time before having any discussions involving suicide prevention. That way they could decide to opt their students out if they wanted to.
So in conversations with Board Member Ellis, she is appeased to leave the rule as is. That is not addressed in this rule, to answer the question, and is looking at potentially either statutory changes or potential rule about parent notification generally. So there's at least one spot where we can see where all of that
Can
is.
you guys hear me?
Yes, and Board Member Ellis is in the room.
Well, I've been
Board
trying
Member
to
or
talk.
Vice Chair Ellis.
Sorry, I've been trying to talk and I had to hang up and call again, so it was apparent no one could hear me. I don't know what you just answered. The last thing I heard was Board Member Bolter asking if my concerns had been addressed. And so I don't want to repeat what's already been said.
Okay, so did you hear the response?
No, because I had to hang up and call back in so you could hear me.
Okay, we'll try that response again.
Board Member Ellis, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not going to address the initial concerns in the rule as written, but they will be addressed in a separate rule or potential statutory changes regarding parental notification.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
But I did have something else I wanted to bring up if this part of the discussion's over.
Okay, well, please do. Again, we're talking about the approval of R27-620 Draft 3.
Yes,
So,
I understand.
Okay.
So during the committee meeting, there was a PowerPoint that then Lorraine sent out at the request of myself to the board. And on one of the slides, there was a myth versus fact. And I am concerned because there's a statement always going around that talking about suicide does not lead to increased suicides. And people always use the term research shows. And Kathy Davis mentioned that study was embedded within the PowerPoint, and that study was not in there. There was just links to external websites with flyers, nothing that was an actual study. And so I I would like to see, if this study does exist, I would like to see it, because as I've talked to clinical psychologists, et cetera, they've mentioned to me that they don't know of a study, they just hear it referred to a lot also, and that it probably has parameters on it, being in certain settings. And so I'm concerned, without looking at this actual study, that we are taking anecdotal evidence and we're using it as justification to push things out that the teachers or whoever is responsible doesn't have the capacity to manage. And so anyway, so I'm just requesting again, if you know where that study is, to please send it on.
Hi, this is Kathy Davis, Suicide Prevention Specialist. Board Member Alice, thank you for that concern. I can go ahead and refer back to some other, in sending out that PowerPoint, that may not have been directly there, so I can kind of talk to you about the reasoning behind that. Is that when people are having suicidal thoughts, being able to talk about it, and it lessens the anxiety surrounding that. And so I will go back and research that, and should I just submit that to you, Lorraine? Okay, I will do that.
And then that would go out to the whole board.
And that will go out to the whole board. You bet.
Thank you. And just another point of clarification, what I'm looking for is, we're using it as justification to have classroom discussions and other things, and I understand there's probably evidence that talking to an individual about it, but I want to know what type of settings, if there's any parameters placed upon that discussion, if we're looking for triggers, if we're equipping students to not have transfer issues placed upon them by taking on other people's emotional baggage.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's well noted.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further discussion. There is a motion, and the motion is that the board approve R277-620 Draft 3 on second and final reading. So we'll call this to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Elise, was she good on that? I think she was still
Yes,
on.
I'm good on it. Thank you. I
Okay,
just want those
thank you.
questions answered.
Just want to make sure your vote was recognized. Please continue.
Okay, the next item is the standard response protocol for student supports. A motion was made to approve the standard response protocol for student supports for both elementary and secondary grades and forward these to the board for final approval.
I'm trying to find that. Okay, here it is.
And while you're
Oh,
looking.
right here.
Okay.
Okay, there it is. The motion before the board is that the board approve the standard response protocol for student support for elementary and secondary grades. Discussion, is that the one? Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous.
Response to 53G 8-11 Board-Approved Curricula for Juvenile Justice Modifications. Motion was made to approve the integrated model of responses to school-based behavior document as amended and forward to the board for approval.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve the integrated model of response to school-based behavior document, standards, and assessment committee. Is that right? No, that's not right. No, I read it wrong. Hey, I'm just reading. Hey, the motion is that the board approve the integrated model of response to school-based behavior document.
Yes.
Period. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
R277488 Critical Language and Dual Language Immersion Program, an amendment. Motion was made to approve R277488 Draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
The motion before the board is that the board approve R277-488 Draft 2 on second and final reading. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous.
Okay, Utah K through 12 Computer Science Framework. Motion was made to approve the Utah K through 12 Computer Science Framework and forward to the board for approval.
Okay, the motion before the board is to approve the Utah K-12 Computer Science Framework. Discussion to that motion. Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
And
Voting is
that's
unanimous.
it.
Board Member
Oh, there's,
Belknap, did you have a,
Just a point of clarification, that's draft, correct? That's still in draft form?
that was,
The science, that's what it says on here, so that's what I voted on.
Yes, it's just the framework.
that's how you get it
Until it's
approved.
done.
it's,
And then it goes out for comment.
Okay.
Okay. Lorraine, do we have something time sensitive we've got to jump on here? School safety, should we skip over?
Safety is a report.
What's that?
The school safety is just a report.
Yeah, but I think we can, let's get into yours, as long as we have